The morning started like any other day. People were moving through the streets, children were heading to school, and workers were busy in their offices. The sky was clear, and the sun rose over the horizon with its usual light. No one expected that this day would become the beginning of something that would change the history of Earth. At first, people thought they were seeing strange clouds. Dark shapes appeared high in the sky, so wide that they seemed to cover the sun. Soon it became clear these were not clouds. They were massive ships, larger than any human had ever seen. Their surfaces were black and silver, reflecting the light of the sun like cold metal. They moved without sound, but the air grew heavy as if the sky itself was under pressure. News spread fast. Radios and televisions broke into programs with urgent voices. Cameras pointed upward, capturing images of these giant vessels. Across every city, people ran outside to look. Some were amazed, some were frightened, and some stood frozen with disbelief. In less than 1 hour, the whole planet knew. Humanity was no longer alone. The ships stayed still for hours, hovering above oceans, mountains, and cities. They did not fire, nor did they move closer. They simply waited. This silence made fear stronger. Children cried in their mothers' arms. Soldiers were called to bases. Leaders from every nation held meetings, their faces pale and voices shaken. Everyone wondered what the visitors wanted. When the first sound came, it was not from a weapon but from the sky itself. A deep voice echoed across the world, translated into every language at once. The message was clear. We are the Dominion. We command this world to surrender. Lay down your weapons and your freedom will be spared. Refuse, and you will be destroyed. The voice was calm, but its coldness carried power. People who heard it felt the weight of those words pressing on their hearts. Surrender or die. Some leaders wanted to respond with peace. They argued that humanity could not fight such power. They said survival was more important than pride. Others argued that surrender meant slavery and the end of everything humans had built. Heated arguments filled every hall of government. Decisions were being made, but fear and doubt clouded every thought. In the middle of all this, there were ordinary people who refused to bow. Tom, a young engineer, sat in his small workshop, watching the news on a broken screen. He clenched his fists as he heard the Dominion's message. For him, surrender was not an option. He believed that every system, no matter how powerful, had a weakness. Maria, a pilot with sharp eyes and steady hands, was at an airfield when the ships appeared. She stared at the sky with anger burning inside her. She had flown against storms, but this was something far greater. She told herself that if Earth needed fighters, she would be one of them. Lee, a scientist who studied energy, watched the alien vessels with both fear and curiosity. He noticed how they moved, how they hovered without effort. He knew there must be a secret behind their power, and secrets could be uncovered. These three had never met, yet on this day they shared the same thought. Humanity could not simply kneel. If there was even the smallest chance to resist, they had to find it. The Dominion ships remained above, unmoving but watching. At night their dark shadows covered the stars, and people could not sleep. Children asked their parents if monsters had come. Old men whispered prayers. Soldiers cleaned their weapons, though they knew those weapons were weak against such machines. Still, deep inside the human spirit, something began to grow. It was not just fear anymore. It was anger, courage, and the will to stand. People remembered stories from history when small nations had fought against empires. They remembered that freedom was never given, it was taken with sacrifice. Tom wrote in his notes, sketching possible designs for devices that might confuse alien signals. Maria tested her old jet, making sure it could still fly even if it was no match for alien crafts. Lee stayed awake through the night, running calculations, hoping to find a flaw in the ship's movements. Above them, the Dominion waited, expecting fear to spread. They believed that humans would soon kneel, as so many other worlds had done before. But they did not understand Earth. They did not understand that weakness could turn into strength when people united. The first day of the invasion ended not with fire but with silence. Yet within that silence, a storm was forming. Humanity was afraid, but it was also thinking, planning, and waiting. The Dominion thought they had already won. They did not know that their greatest mistake was believing humans would surrender without a fight. The second day began with a heavy sky. The alien ships were still there, hanging above the earth like giant shadows. Their size made mountains look small, and their dark metal bodies blocked the morning sun. People all over the world woke up not knowing if this day would bring peace or fire. The fear of the unknown grew stronger with each passing hour. Governments tried to calm their people. Leaders went on television, speaking carefully, telling citizens to remain calm and trust the process. But their voices lacked strength. The Dominion had spoken once, and everyone waited for them to speak again. It came just after noon. The same deep voice filled the air, translated into every language. You have one cycle of your sun to choose. Surrender, and your species will live under our protection. Resist, and your world will burn. The message was short but powerful. Images followed, projected into the skies above cities. The pictures showed other planets conquered by the Dominion. Great towers built by aliens stood over ruined cities. People from those planets walked in long lines, watched closely by Dominion guards. Their faces were empty, their eyes filled with silence. The meaning was clear. If Earth surrendered, life would not end, but freedom would vanish. Humanity would survive, but it would no longer belong to itself. In secret meeting rooms, leaders argued. Some wanted to accept the demand. They feared that resistance would lead to the destruction of Earth itself. They said humanity was too weak, too divided, and too far behind in technology. Better to bend and live than fight and die. Others shouted in anger. They believed surrender would mean slavery for generations to come. They said it was better to fight and fall than to give up without trying. The arguments grew heated, but no agreement was reached. In homes and streets, ordinary people spoke with one another. Some whispered about leaving cities and hiding in forests or mountains. Others wanted to fight, even with stones if they had nothing else. Fear mixed with courage. Tom sat in his workshop, staring at the broken drone he had managed to find in the countryside. It was small compared to the massive ships above, but it carried parts of alien design he had never seen before. He studied its smooth metal and strange circuits. He told himself that nothing was perfect. If the Dominion used machines, those machines had limits, and limits could be broken. Maria was on the airfield again, her jet parked under a camouflage net. She ran her hands across the body of the aircraft, whispering to herself. She knew her old jet was like an ant compared to the alien giants, but she also knew one truth: speed, courage, and skill could surprise even the strongest enemy. She spoke to other pilots, and they shared her feelings. If the order came, they would fight. Lee worked in his lab, watching the alien ships through a telescope. He noticed how they hovered without effort, their engines glowing faintly with strange light. He wrote down every flicker, every movement. He shared his notes with other scientists across the world through secret networks. They all agreed on one thing: if they could understand the energy source, maybe they could find a weakness. The Dominion commander, hidden in the command ship, watched Earth with cold patience. To him, humans looked small and foolish. He had seen this many times before. On other worlds, there was always the same story. At first, people resisted, but once they saw the strength of the Dominion, they gave up. He believed Earth would be no different. But in his pride, he did not see what was happening on the ground. Across the world, whispers of resistance were spreading. Small groups began to form in hidden places. Farmers offered their barns for secret meetings. Engineers gathered broken parts of machines. Pilots practiced night flights. Scientists shared coded messages about alien technology. When the Dominion showed pictures of conquered worlds, they wanted to scare Earth into surrender. Instead, they awakened something else. People saw those ruined cities, those empty faces, and felt fire in their hearts. They did not want their children to walk in chains. They did not want their homes to become silent ruins. That night, Tom stayed awake, sketching a design for a device that could block alien signals. Maria trained with other pilots, flying low and fast to avoid detection. Lee sent messages to secret groups of scientists, telling them about strange energy patterns he had discovered. Each one of them felt the same truth. Humanity was not ready, but it could not simply surrender. As the sun set, the Dominion ships glowed with their cold light above cities. The voice of the commander had gone silent again, waiting for humanity's answer. He believed the fear would grow overnight, and by morning, the leaders would bow. But down on Earth, courage was also growing. People gathered in small groups, whispering promises to one another. They had little to fight with, but they still had their will. The Dominion thought humans would bend like grass in the wind. Instead, they were beginning to stand like stone. The second day of the invasion ended with silence once again. Yet it was not the silence of fear alone. It was also the silence of planning, of waiting, of hearts deciding that freedom was worth more than life. The storm was building, and the Dominion did not see it. The third day after the alien arrival began with the same heavy sky. The massive ships of the Dominion still floated above Earth, blocking sunlight and casting long shadows across the land. For many, fear was still strong, but something else had begun to spread. It was small at first, like sparks in dry grass, but it was growing. Those sparks were rebellion. Tom sat in his workshop with tools scattered around him. The broken alien drone he had found lay on the table. He had taken it apart piece by piece, studying every wire and every curve of its strange metal. The design was far more advanced than human machines, yet Tom saw something that gave him hope. The drone used a system to send signals back to its command ship. That meant it relied on communication. If it relied on communication, it could be blocked or confused. Tom started sketching an idea for a device that could jam those signals. It was rough, it was risky, but it was a start. Maria stood with other pilots at a hidden airfield far from the city. The planes they had were old, their paint scratched and their engines tired, but they still worked. Maria ran drills with her squadron, flying low and fast through valleys, practicing how to disappear under radar. She told her fellow pilots that the enemy thought humans were weak, but weakness could be turned into strength. Surprise, courage, and unity could make even small jets dangerous. Her words lifted the spirits of the pilots, and their eyes burned with determination. Lee, in his lab, kept studying the alien ships. He noticed a pattern in the way their engines pulsed. It was like a rhythm, steady but with a faint delay at times. He believed it was linked to their energy core. If so, then maybe those cores could be overloaded under the right conditions. He wrote to other scientists using secret codes. Soon, messages came back from researchers in other countries. They too had seen strange details. Together they began to share their findings, building a map of the alien technology piece by piece. Meanwhile, across the world, ordinary people joined the rising movement. Farmers hid supplies in their barns. Mechanics repaired old trucks and turned them into armored vehicles. Teachers taught children in secret shelters, reminding them of courage from old human stories. Soldiers trained quietly at night, sharpening their skills even though they knew their weapons were weak. The Dominion commander, sitting inside the great command ship, grew restless. Reports showed that humans had not yet surrendered. They were taking too long. He believed fear should have broken them by now. He ordered small patrols of drones to search for signs of rebellion. He still thought of humans as children, but he wanted to remind them of his power. One of those patrols entered a desert region where Maria and her squadron were training. The pilots spotted the drones in the distance. Maria ordered silence and led her team into the sky. Their jets roared low, dust rising from the desert floor. The drones noticed them and turned to attack. The battle that followed was fast and fierce. The alien drones fired beams of light, slicing the air, but Maria and her team used speed and skill. They flew low, dodging behind cliffs, tricking the drones into crashing into rock. Maria's jet managed to fire an old missile, striking one drone and sending it spinning into the sand. For the first time, humans had destroyed alien machines in open battle. News of this victory spread quickly. Radios carried the story across the land, and people cheered. For the first time since the invasion began, hope was stronger than fear. Children painted pictures of jets defeating alien ships. Old men raised their fists with pride. The Dominion expected silence, but they had awakened courage. At the same time, Tom's work brought results. His device, built from wires and old equipment, managed to block the signal of a captured drone for a few seconds. It was not perfect, but it proved that alien systems could be interrupted. He shared his design with others, and soon, engineers in hidden workshops around the world began building their own versions. Lee's group of scientists also achieved progress. They discovered that the alien engines gave off bursts of radiation that matched the rhythm he had seen. If they could push those engines past their limits, maybe the ships would fail. It was only a theory, but it was a seed of hope. Everywhere, the sparks grew brighter. Small victories gave people courage. Secret groups formed in cities, planning sabotage. Pilots trained harder. Scientists worked longer hours. Farmers stored food for the fighters. Humanity was slowly turning its fear into resistance. The Dominion commander received reports of lost drones. He was not alarmed yet, but he grew impatient. He believed that crushing the humans would be easy once the order was given. He still did not see the truth. He did not see that the humans were uniting in a way he had not expected. He thought they were divided, but in the face of a common enemy, they were becoming one. The day ended with fires burning in the desert where drones had fallen, and with secret meetings happening in barns, labs, and shelters across the earth. The rebellion had begun. It was still small, still fragile, but it was alive. The Dominion had asked for surrender, but instead, they had given humanity something far more powerful, a reason to fight. The fourth day of the invasion began with heat rising in the desert. The sun burned over the sand, but the attention of the world was not on the weather. It was on the growing tension between humans and the Dominion. The alien ship still floated above Earth, silent and waiting. But below them, people were preparing. Maria and her squadron of pilots were ordered to a desert base. The base was hidden in rocky valleys, with runways carved between cliffs. From there, the pilots could launch attacks and then disappear back into cover. Engineers worked day and night repairing old jets, refueling, and fitting them with every weapon they could find. They had missiles, cannons, and even homemade explosives. None of it was equal to alien power, but it was all they had. Tom was also at the desert base, carrying his signal jammer device. He had improved it with the help of other engineers. Now it could block alien drones for longer periods, though only in short bursts. He hoped it would be enough to make a difference when the real fight came. He worked with soldiers to mount the jammer on vehicles, preparing to use it during combat. Lee joined the base as well, bringing information gathered from scientists around the world. He explained to the commanders that the alien machines had weak points. If their shields could be disrupted even for seconds, missiles might do damage. His calm voice carried weight, and the soldiers listened closely. As night fell, scouts reported alien movement. The Dominion had sent war machines into the desert. These were not the small drones from before. They were towering machines with glowing weapons, walking on long metallic legs. Their eyes shone with red light, scanning the land for human fighters. Behind them flew a swarm of drones, ready to strike. The commanders gave the order. Humanity would not wait to be hunted. They would strike first. Before dawn, Maria and her squadron prepared for launch. The jets roared to life, their engines echoing through the valley. Maria sat in her cockpit, gripping the controls. She looked at her fellow pilots and gave a firm nod. No one spoke, but every face showed the same determination. At the same time, Tom and Lee rode in armored vehicles carrying the signal jammer. Soldiers loaded weapons and checked their gear. They all knew the risk. Many might not return. But none of them hesitated. As the sun rose, the first clash began. Alien machines marched through the desert, their weapons glowing with deadly light. The earth shook under their steps. Then the sky roared as Maria and her squadron flew low over the sand, heading straight for the enemy. The drones rose to meet them, firing beams of light. The air burned as energy cut through it, but Maria and her team swerved and rolled, dodging with skill. Missiles streaked across the sky, exploding against alien shields. For a moment, the shields held, but then Tom activated the jammer from the ground. The alien drones flickered, their systems confused. In that instant, Maria fired again. This time, her missile struck true. One drone burst into flames and fell into the sand. Cheers erupted on the radio. For the first time in open battle, humans had destroyed alien machines. The fight grew louder and fiercer. Pilots dove and climbed, weaving through beams of light. On the ground, soldiers fired heavy cannons and rockets at the towering walkers. The shields shimmered under the strikes, flashing with strain. Lee guided the soldiers, pointing out patterns in the alien movements. He noticed that the walkers paused for seconds between their attacks, as if their systems needed to cool down. He shouted orders, telling the soldiers to strike in those moments. The soldiers obeyed, and explosions rocked the desert. One walker stumbled, its leg shattering under the fire. It crashed into the sand with a thunderous sound. The Dominion commander, watching from orbit, frowned. He had expected humans to scatter, not to fight with such coordination. He ordered reinforcements, but the damage was already done. The humans had shown they could wound the Dominion. The battle raged for hours. Jets screamed across the sky, drones exploded in bursts of fire, and soldiers fought with every ounce of strength. The desert shook with the clash of machines and men. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, the Dominion forces began to retreat. The remaining drones rose into the sky and vanished into the distance, leaving burning wrecks behind them. When the dust settled, the desert was filled with smoke and broken metal. Human soldiers stood exhausted but proud. They had lost comrades, but they had gained something far greater. They had proved that the Dominion was not untouchable. Maria landed her jet, stepping out to cheers from her fellow pilots. Tom wiped sweat from his face as he powered down the jammer. Lee stood with soldiers, his notes filled with new details from the battle. News of the victory spread quickly across the world. Radios carried the story, and people listened with wide eyes and hopeful hearts. For the first time, Earth had stood against the Dominion in open battle and survived. That night, as stars returned to the desert sky, the people in the base gathered together. They were tired, but their hearts burned with new fire. They knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion was still strong, but humanity had shown it could fight. The first clash had ended, and the world now believed that resistance was possible. The desert battle changed everything. For the first time, humanity had struck the Dominion and forced them to retreat. It was not a final victory, but it was proof that the invaders could bleed. Across the world, people lifted their heads with pride. Fear did not vanish, but it no longer ruled. In the hidden base, Tom, Maria, and Lee gathered with the commanders to study what they had learned. The wreckage of destroyed drones and walkers had been dragged into hangars. Engineers worked day and night, taking them apart piece by piece. Tom ran his hands over the alien metal, feeling the heat still trapped inside the broken machines. He told the others that no system was perfect, and this battle had proved it. Lee stood over a table filled with notes and charts. He explained what he had discovered during the fight. The Dominion weapons were powerful, but they overheated if fired too often. The glowing pulse of their engines revealed strain. He believed the alien ships in orbit used the same kind of energy. If pushed hard enough, those giant ships might also fail. The commanders listened closely. They knew this information was dangerous but valuable. If humanity could strike the heart of the Dominion fleet, the war could turn. Yet the question was how. The shields of the alien ships were far stronger than those of the drones or walkers. Ordinary weapons would bounce off them like stones against steel. Tom leaned forward and shared his idea. During the desert battle, his jammer had disrupted drone signals. What if they built stronger jammers, ones powerful enough to interfere with the fleet itself? Even if only for seconds, it might weaken the shields and open the way for an attack. It was risky, but it was possible. The commanders agreed. The world would have to unite its best engineers and scientists to make such weapons real. Messages were sent through secret channels to every corner of Earth. Factories were ordered to stop producing ordinary goods and start producing parts for the new devices. Workers volunteered by the thousands. Farmers gave up metal from their tools, miners dug deeper for rare elements, and shipyards turned into laboratories. Humanity, once divided by borders, now worked as one. Maria watched all this with pride, but she also knew the cost. Training for pilots grew harder. She and her squadron flew long hours every day, practicing maneuvers, testing new weapons, and preparing for the moment when they would face the fleet. She spoke to young pilots who had never seen war before, telling them stories of courage. She reminded them that the sky belonged to humanity and not to the Dominion. Meanwhile, Lee and his group of scientists pushed deeper into the secrets of alien energy. They discovered that the Dominion's power cores relied on a crystal-like element. The cores were efficient but unstable if overloaded. Lee explained that if they forced enough energy back into those cores, the ships could collapse from within. It was a dangerous plan, but it gave humanity a target. The Dominion commander, high above in the orbiting flagship, grew angrier with each passing report. He could not understand how humans were still resisting. On other worlds, rebellion had been crushed quickly. But here, every strike seemed to give humans more courage. His advisors warned him that resistance was spreading, yet he dismissed them. He believed Earth would eventually break, just as all the others had. But he was wrong. In secret workshops, Tom and other engineers built the first prototype of a new hybrid weapon. It combined human steel with stolen alien parts. The device was heavy and unstable, but when tested, it fired a burst of energy stronger than any human cannon. Soldiers cheered when they saw the result. Tom smiled for the first time in days, knowing the impossible was becoming real. News of progress spread quietly, lifting hearts across the planet. People in villages and cities began to believe not only in survival but in victory. Children drew pictures of alien ships falling from the sky. Old songs of freedom were sung again. Still, danger grew with each passing day. The Dominion sent more patrols, and their ships tightened their grip on Earth's skies. Battles in remote areas took lives, and many towns suffered under occupation. But even in pain, humanity's spirit burned brighter. For every village destroyed, 2 more groups of fighters rose in anger. Maria flew missions at night, guiding her squadron through dark skies. They practiced striking targets and vanishing before the enemy could respond. She told herself again and again that one day these drills would be used against the fleet itself. Lee worked until his hands shook, writing formulas and building models. He knew the science was not enough without courage, and he saw courage in the faces of everyone around him. Tom refused to rest, building stronger versions of his jammer. He dreamed of the day when his machines would silence the Dominion's mighty fleet. The hidden weakness was no longer just an idea. It was becoming a weapon. Humanity was preparing not just to survive but to strike back at the invaders with everything they had. Above Earth, the Dominion still waited, their black ships filling the sky. They believed time was on their side. But below, in deserts, mountains, and hidden bases, humanity was turning time into strength. The storm was building, and when it broke, it would strike with the force of a world that refused to kneel. The sky was dark with alien ships. The Dominion fleet had returned, larger and more powerful than before. Cities watched in fear as the enormous vessels hovered above oceans, mountains, and plains. This time, they did not wait. Their presence alone shook the world, and people knew that a final confrontation had begun. Maria stood on the runway of the desert base. Her jet's engines roared as she checked every system. Her squadron was ready. Pilots climbed into their cockpits, their faces set with determination. They knew the enemy was far stronger, but they also knew what they had learned. Humanity had strength that could not be measured by weapons alone. Courage, unity, and cleverness could turn the tide. Tom stood beside an armored vehicle, holding his latest signal jammer. It was the largest one yet, powered by combined energy from human and alien technology. Soldiers helped him move it to the edge of the battlefield. When activated, it could confuse enemy sensors for minutes at a time. Tom knew the timing had to be perfect. One mistake, and the fleet's weapons could destroy everything. Lee worked quickly, directing teams of scientists to coordinate energy strikes. They had calculated the pulse patterns of the alien cores and designed hybrid cannons to overload them. Every shot had to hit at the right moment. Precision would decide victory or defeat. The first shots came from the Dominion. Beams of energy cut through the sky, striking desert plains and distant mountains. Dust and smoke rose from the impact, and soldiers braced themselves. The fleet's firepower was overwhelming, but humanity did not falter. Maria led her squadron low and fast, dodging beams and striking drones with missiles. The sound of engines and explosions filled the air as jets darted like arrows. On the ground, Tom activated the signal jammer. Alien sensors flickered and malfunctioned. Drones lost tracking for a moment, and human forces seized the chance. Soldiers fired hybrid cannons, hitting alien walkers in their weak spots. One machine collapsed in a shower of sparks and fire. Another stumbled and fell, sending shock waves across the sand. Lee shouted instructions as he monitored energy patterns. Now! Fire again! Hybrid cannons roared, sending blasts of human and alien energy at the fleet. The pulses struck the alien ships, and one massive vessel shuddered. Sparks ran across its hull, and its shields flickered. People on Earth watched the sky, unsure if victory was possible. Maria's squadron saw an opportunity. Using the distraction, they dove toward a large command ship. Missiles streaked from the jets, striking the hull where shields had weakened. The ship rocked violently, alarms flashing inside it. Maria felt her heart pound, but she stayed steady, guiding her squadron with precision. Each pilot knew their role, and each movement was calculated. On the ground, Tom and his team continued to maintain the jammers. Their devices hummed with energy, blocking communications between alien ships. Without coordination, the Dominion vessels could not focus their fire. Small victories multiplied into larger ones as drones fell one by one. The Dominion commander, watching from his flagship, could not believe what he was seeing. Humans had learned. They were clever, coordinated, and fearless. His fleet was strong, but the humans had something he had not expected. They were unpredictable. They adapted, and they fought with a will that no machine could match. Hours passed, and the battle raged. Explosions lit the sky. Drones fell in fire. Aliens' walkers collapsed. Jets darted through the beams of energy, striking at critical points. Humanity's forces worked as one, every soldier, pilot, and scientist acting in perfect coordination. Then came the final moment. Lee shouted, "Tom, now! Aim for the main core." Tom activated the largest jammer, and the hybrid cannons fired in unison. A massive pulse of energy struck the command ship. The hull shivered violently, sparks flew, and the engines groaned. Maria led her jets closer, delivering the final missiles. The alien ship erupted in a bright explosion, shaking the sky. Smaller ships nearby faltered and fell. The Dominion fleet, now disoriented and damaged, retreated into space. Humanity had won the day. The sky cleared, revealing stars once hidden by alien shadows. People across Earth cheered. Fires of battle still burned, but the world had survived. Tom, Maria, and Lee stood together in the desert, watching the stars return. They were exhausted, but their hearts burned with pride. Humanity had faced the greatest power it had ever known and had not bent. The Dominion had expected surrender. Instead, they had received defiance, courage, and unity. Humanity had proved that no force, no matter how advanced, could break the spirit of a world determined to fight. As night fell, the survivors returned to their homes, their eyes bright with hope. The battle was won, but the work of rebuilding had just begun. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged victorious, stronger, and more united than ever before. The sky above Earth was quiet. The Dominion fleet had vanished into the void, leaving only faint trails of fire and smoke from the battle. For the first time since the arrival of the invaders, the world felt a calm that was not born of fear. People stepped outside their homes, looking up at the stars, realizing that the shadows that had loomed for days were finally gone. Maria walked among her fellow pilots, her uniform scorched from the battle, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. She smiled as she watched the younger pilots laughing, some of them cheering as they recounted their first victories. The sky was still full of smoke from destroyed drones and walkers, but hope had replaced fear. Humanity had proven it could stand against the greatest power the galaxy had ever known. Tom was in the desert base, checking the final jammers and hybrid cannons. Soldiers crowded around, asking him questions about how the devices had worked. He explained patiently, showing the designs and explaining the methods that had disrupted the alien systems. They listened with awe. What had seemed impossible days before had been accomplished through human ingenuity, courage, and teamwork. Lee stood on a rocky hill overlooking the base. He watched engineers, soldiers, and pilots working together to recover what remained of the battlefield. He thought about the energy pulses, the patterns of alien power, and the calculations that had made their victory possible. Science had been a weapon, but courage had been the force that carried it forward. Humanity had learned something important: intelligence without will was powerless, and will without knowledge could not win. The first reports from cities and towns reached the base. People were rebuilding, repairing homes, and helping one another. The fear of surrender was gone, replaced by a sense of pride. Humanity had survived a trial that no one thought possible. Survivors shared stories of bravery. Ordinary citizens had hidden children, guided strangers to safety, and even sabotaged alien machines. Heroes had been born in every corner of the world. In the distance, Maria's squadron took off one final time, flying over the desert where the last remnants of alien walkers lay smoldering. She felt a surge of relief and joy. The Dominion had expected submission, but humans had fought with every ounce of strength and heart they had. The sky had been theirs, not through force alone, but through courage, intelligence, and unity. Tom walked through the base with Lee and Maria, talking quietly about what would come next. The fight was over, but the world had to recover. Cities had been damaged, crops burned, and lives lost. Yet there was no despair. Humanity had discovered something far more valuable than material wealth or technology. It had discovered the strength of its spirit. News broadcasts across the world told the story. The Dominion had been forced to retreat. Humanity had struck back against a force that no other world had ever resisted. Images of jets against alien ships, soldiers defending towns, and scientists coordinating attacks filled screens. People cheered in streets, villages, and cities. Flags were raised. Songs of victory were sung. Leaders held meetings with survivors. They spoke not of surrender, but of unity. The world had learned that differences could be set aside in the face of common danger. Nations that had once argued over borders, resources, and power now shared one truth: the survival of humanity depended on cooperation, courage, and hope. Maria, Tom, and Lee walked through a small town where children were helping rebuild houses. Maria knelt and talked to one child, showing her how to repair a small drone that had been damaged in training exercises. Tom explained to teenagers how signals could be used to control machines, teaching them knowledge that had saved lives. Lee pointed to solar panels and engines, showing how energy could be harnessed efficiently. They were not teaching fear. They were teaching strength. At night, the stars shone clearly above the repaired town. People gathered in open spaces, singing, laughing, and sharing stories. Humanity had faced the impossible, and it had survived. The Dominion had expected humans to surrender, to kneel, and to obey. Instead, they had met defiance, courage, and unity. The victory was not just in destroyed machines or fallen ships. It was in every human who had refused to give in, every mind that had worked tirelessly, every hand that had helped another. Humanity had proven that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could overcome a world that refused to bend. In the days that followed, the leaders of Earth sent messages into space, declaring that humanity would never bow to domination. The stars were no longer symbols of fear. They were symbols of possibility, courage, and destiny. Humanity had faced the greatest challenge it had ever known, and it had won not only for itself but for every world that might one day hear the call to fight. Maria, Tom, and Lee stood together one last time, looking at the horizon. The sun rose over the mountains, casting gold across the land. Humanity had survived, and it had triumphed. The fight had been hard, the losses real, but the lesson was clear. Fear could be overcome. Unity could be forged. And the human spirit could achieve what no power in the galaxy could destroy. Earth was free. Humanity was alive. And the stars awaited, not as threats, but as a challenge for a world that had learned to fight and win.